Who wants to start?
What are still the biggest question marks you still have to have answered as you head into the summer?
Yeah, I still, as much as anything and as good as, I really felt like we've had a great spring. There's competition across the board, and I think that we've had more guys push the needle to become the best they possibly can be than we've had. But until you get under the lights, until you're really getting put in those game-like positions, I think it's hard, in where you're talking some guys at receiver. You're talking some guys at defensive back. Until they have to own that position and own the reality of it, I think it's hard. So, we'll keep pouring into those guys and keep watching those guys push the envelope. But I'll tell you, at those positions, maybe more competition and more guys really rising to the top.
Is there any clarity at running back?
Yeah, so many of those guys have real playing experience that, I almost, and this is not a knock against David because he was such a great player for us, but those are guys like Kane, who's finally healthy, and I think he's had a great spring. Sheldon, it's been great to see Breece Hall. I think he's from 1 to practice 14, made great strides. So, Johnny's been limited because, he got fixed up in the winter, but he's out there, can do non-contact stuff. So, those guys are veteran guys. I trust those guys. I think it's some of those other positions that I'm still waiting to see, but I'm really happy with that group. I thought that group's had a great spring.
What's the coaching been like for the offensive line? Just talking to different guys, it sounds like there's been a lot of sets of eyes down there with Jeff and Tom and you, everybody.
Yeah.
Kind of what's gone into the evaluation of that group and its growth, kind of?
Well, to be honest with you, the main set of eyes is the most important one. That's Coach Myers. And I'll be honest, I really feel like that group, by the midpoint of the season last year to the end of the season, made tremendous growth. You even look in the bowl game, and you obviously we take some of the false starts out of it, physically imposing their will on somebody. It's the first time we've done that since we've been here. And you hope that that's the growth. You got guys that are juniors, and now they're going to be seniors. And I really think the growth that group's even made in the offseason in January and February. We're bigger, we're stronger. We look like what a real offensive line looks like. And that part's exciting. And then to watch that's the group that's kind of the leadership group right now in terms of, what we're doing, how we're doing things. That's fun to watch again. I feel like I haven't seen that for 4 or 5 years. And so, I think that group's really grown immensely. And a lot of credit to Julian, a lot of credit to Kniffel, 2 guys that have been anchors and starting a lot of games here and playing a lot of good football. And, I think Colin Knowles had an unbelievable spring. He's really made great growth, which you'd like to see. He had to play a redshirt freshman at center last year, and I thought for the most part, that young man did some really good things in his growth. And you've seen in his confidence after a year under his belt. Really fun to watch. Colin Olsen, but then you talk Trevor Downing, and you talk Joey Ramos, and now all of a sudden you're like real competition. Rob Hudson's had a transformational winter and spring is what I would call it. So, there's a lot of competition there right now, and that's going to play out into the fall camp. And, when there's real competition, you're going to come every day to fight for your job. Then all of a sudden you see real growth, and that's what we're starting to get down there. And a credit to Jeff and a credit to that staff. But, he's done a great job with those guys.
How much has your 5 guys, your 5 starters, how much have they practiced even this spring?
Yeah, a lot, Randy.
Really? Okay.
In my opinion, we still got work to do, and as much as I do feel like we pushed the envelope at times last year in a positive direction, I still feel like there's growth to happen. And, part of that is playing and getting those reps together. And you got to remember, Colin Olsen just came into the mix, kind of 4 games into it. And, now we've moved some guys around and we've tried some different combinations out there together. And that's fun to watch and see. Those guys have gotten a lot of really good reps, and we've tried to be smart with some of those guys that played a lot of reps as well.
In however many years you've been a coach, have you ever been satisfied with anything, though?
No, and that's probably not the case. But I think what you begin to see is how close are we to reaching our full potential. And I think some areas you're much closer than other areas, and that offensive line area certainly. I'm not hiding it. That's an area that hasn't been where we wanted it, or close to where we wanted it until really probably I felt like at times in the mid part of last year. And I'm not saying it's perfect. We still got areas to grow, but I think we're finally getting a lot closer to where we want to be in those areas and in the tight end position as well.
What is it about Breece that made, where you saw those biggest strides from, like you said, the first practice to where he is now?
Well, you should be you know, you should be going probably, you know, on a date to Pizza Hut, you know, with your girlfriend, and instead you're out there and all of a sudden Ray Lima's at nose tackle and Jaquan Bailey's at one end and Annie's at the other end, and all of a sudden you're like, holy smokes, that's my first day of practice. And I just think gaining confidence and you know, poise and just feeling the game, and that's a position where, you know, if you can run the ball, you can run the ball, and I think all of a sudden you saw him gain that confidence midway through the spring and really have an understanding of, you know, offenses aren't that different, but learning the terminology from high school. You know what, that means the same thing in college football. Cool, I can get it, and feeling confident in what he's supposed to do. I think that's the biggest thing you saw in Brees, and you saw him really kind of get his feet under his ground midway through the spring.
You talked about with Brock after the first practice, the leadership being the thing you want to see from him. Have you seen that?
Yeah, he's special. You know, he's one of those guys that it's really fun to watch great quarterbacks start to take ownership of their craft, and Brock's beginning to do that in a lot of ways. And from a complete understanding to what we're doing to, you know, continuing to develop with some of the things that Coach Manning was able to bring from Indianapolis, and just giving him complete ownership in what we're trying to get accomplished. It's fun to watch that. And is he a finished product? He's not, but man, is he a guy that here's a young guy that had success. Will you go get better? And he decided to do that, and that's been really fun. And not just Brock, you know, the rest of those quarterbacks. I think Real's had a really good spring, and you know, John Kohler's another guy. You know, again, from practice 1 to where we are today, practice 14, a lot of growth. So, you know, that's a fun room right now, and that's a room that, you know, all of a sudden now you were kind of really worried about what was that room going to look like, and now all of a sudden you're like, gosh, we're excited about getting to fall camp with this group and see where this group can go.
Coach Manning talked about multiplicity a little bit. We heard the running back talk about catching the ball in the backfield. How much are you guys trying to do different things, and how much could the identity of the offense continue to evolve going into the season?
Well, you guys get sick of me saying multiplicity. I feel like you guys make fun of me about that every once in a while. But, you know, again, offensively, it's just like defense. You know, like the reality of creating matchups within your offense is really important. And where we haven't had some of those pieces that we could really create real matchups with tight ends, multiple tight ends, backs, you know, multiple backs that can go into games and do different skill sets, multiple offensive linemen. You know, there's a lot of things that we've wanted to do, and I think we've continued to evolve a little bit every year. And, you know, again, it goes back to players, formations, plays. Who are they, and how do you create some advantages for yourself to be successful? And so, you know, we certainly got some of those pieces, and I think it's been fun to be able to put that jigsaw puzzle together a little bit. Now you take what you do this spring, and that's what's really fun about now we're getting into this spring and summertime where we as coaches can really say, who are we as a football team? What are we? And how do we become the best version of ourselves we can be? So, yeah, it's been fun to tinker and do some different things. It's going to be really fun to sit down and watch it and say, where are we going, you know, once we get to the summer.
What did you see from depth at linebacker? Because obviously, you know, Mike, you know,
Yeah.
Marcel, you know, O'Brien and Jake to a certain extent too, but just kind of filling out that 3-man group and then having some depth behind
Yeah,
them.
you know, I felt really good about that group going into spring ball, and today I feel, you know, maybe better about it. You know, I think Will McDonald, I said this, I think he's a special football player. He's a difference maker in a lot of ways, and, you know, trying to find a proper fit for him and what we do defensively, and shaping our defense to what he can do defensively. I think that's been really fun to watch develop and grow. Chandler Paul Vermacher, I think, has had a really good spring in terms of what we wanted to get out of Chandler. Gary Bond's another young guy that's had flashes this spring, and then you throw those 4 guys in. You know, I think very similar to Brock is what you see from Mike Rose. I think Mike Rose is a guy that easily could have took his foot off the gas and said, man, I had a great fall. You know, but now he's 240 some pounds, and he's running downhill, and he's confident, and he's taking great ownership in what we're doing on the defense. So, yeah, it's been a good spring for those guys, and I think that's a group that they're going to be fighting for playing time, and it's what you want. And you know how I feel. I'd love to have a 2 deep on that defense that can all those guys can play, and I think that's an area we certainly feel that confident going into fall that we can have that.
Jaquan, we've seen him
Right.
hobble around. What's going on there?
Yeah, so Jaquan kind of tweaked his foot early in spring. You know, Jaquan will be full go here in the next 2 weeks, and you know, a lot of it just precautionary from our end of it. And so, you know, he got dinged up, but you know, he's done a great job of kind of staying engaged, and a nice thing for him, and certainly might be for us that it's nothing serious.
One of us are on this. What about Meeker? Was it Meeker?
Meeker, yeah, Meeker, same thing. You know, Meeker, I want to say, you know, the end of the first scrimmage dinged up as well, and again, nothing that's been major for us, and it's been good because it's forced other guys to get in and us to be able to move things around. But Bryce was back at it today doing some non-contact things, so we're fortunate.
Sorry, how are things looking at wide receiver in the context of you lost arguably the most talented receiver the school's ever seen?
Man, I feel like I had to answer that question a year ago, you know, and so, you know, the reality of it is we think there's some really talented guys there, and you know, when you start talking about that, you talk about two guys that have proven it, and Tariq Melton, and you know, obviously, you know, certainly what, you know, we've been able to do with him, and he's a guy that in a lot of ways has shown multiple flexibility. You know, and then you certainly talk about Deshante, and he does a lot of great things. I think those two guys have been. What I loved about those guys is they've shown great leadership because there's so much youth and amongst the other guys, but the competition between those other guys and Sean Shaw, Joe Skates. You know, you talk about certainly some different guys that have risen to the occasion, and you know what, great competition breeds some success, and that's been really fun to watch that really group continue to develop. Landon Akers has done some really good things as he's coming back off of an injury, so a lot of competition there right now, and really fun to watch.